It's a beautiful day here up in Byron Bay, and it's been raining a lot lately. It's just come sunny today, so the bees have actually been a little bit hungry for a little while, and today they're out and about. There's lots and lots of activity in the front of the hives, and it's telling us that the bees are onto something, some food source, and they're bringing it back in. So today I thought we'd do a brood inspection. Cedar's away. My name's Pete, and I'll take you through the brood box and answer any questions you might have. I'm just gonna pop the top, blow some smoke in the entrance, go down this way. And I'm just going to take the super straight off today. I'm not really going to worry about it. I'm just going to take it off and put it aside so we can get straight into the brood box. So I took that rear cover off because this actually is a great handle to lift the brood box up. And I like to go in above the queen excluder. I'm guessing it'll probably be quite stuck. Oh no, it came free pretty well. So I just like to put the super on its end. I find that disturbs the bees a lot less, and it's fairly sturdy and steady. And we can get in and lift the excluder off. Now sometimes it's easy to flick all the bees off the excluder. So what you can try and do is just get it a little bit free and then just kind of twist it around in a circle, and then it doesn't fling all the bees off. I like to just turn the excluder over and look for the queen underneath. You can see some drones underneath. So the thing with that is, if you go to put the excluder back on after you've finished and you put it upside down, those drones are still on there and they'll be stuck upstairs because they can't get back down through the excluder. So maybe we'll just shake them off. Just a quick shake. And that puts a lot of bees in the air, but they're not necessarily grumpy, they're just in the air.
Pete, for the newbie tuning in, why would the queen only be found in the bottom box?
Great question. So we use this queen excluder. We put it on top of the bottom box, and that ensures that the queen can't get through this mesh, but the workers can. So both the queen and the drones can't pass through the mesh, but the workers will go upstairs, and that ensures that only honey is put up in this top box. And that's what we want. We don't want any brood up in the flow frames. So
But just a question coming in on that queen excluder. Why can't she fit through?
It's just a size issue. So the queen is a little bit bigger than the workers. She has a longer abdomen, but she's also a little bit wider. And so the excluder is designed specifically with that in mind, so that the workers can wriggle through, but the queen just can't fit. Every now and again you'll get a really small queen that can actually fit through, and she might get caught upstairs in the top box, and then you as the beekeeper have to go and catch her and put her back down.
Pete, do you catch her just with your hands or with some kind of tool?
Yeah, I do. I catch her with my fingers. You can actually pick up bees if you're feeling kind of brave. You can pick them up with your fingers just by the wings. Try and get a worker. There we go. And I just really gently have her. And she can't sting me, and she's not hurt. And that's how I pick up the queen. But you can also use a little queen clip. They're a really cheap little device that you just, it looks like a hair clip. You open it up and just catch the queen bee that way. And then you can just either let her go in the brood box, or you can place her in the entrance and she'll walk in straight in the entrance. So you can see there's lots of activity today. I'm just going to grab this first frame.
Pete, typically when you're doing inspections you tend to wear a bee suit. Can you explain for everyone out there why you're not?
Yeah, if you're a beginner, you should definitely wear a bee suit. Personally for me, I just don't really like it, and I'm okay with getting stung. I don't react to getting stung. It's important that if you react to getting stung, you definitely wear a bee suit. I like the feeling of not having the suit because I feel like it puts me a lot more in tune with how the bees are and what they're doing. It's a lot more tactile, but having said that, I do get stung a lot, so definitely wear your suit. And if these bees get stingy, I will put my jacket on. It's just over there. Also, it's really hot, and I don't like being hot in my bee suit. So I'm just having a quick look. Just going to blow on these bees to get them out of the way. You can see some pollen down here. So that's always a good sign that the bees have got a little bit of pollen, some food coming in. You want to look for pollen on bees' legs too. This is an outside frame, so I don't expect there to be much on it. You can see it's a little dry, there's no honey. There is a little bit of brood down here. And I'm just trying to angle the cells. I'm supporting this with my finger. It's when you've got naturally drawn comb like this and the bees haven't anchored it all the way, it can get a little bit bendy. You can see it's kind of bendy. So I'm trying to get the sun down the cells at the moment, so I'm just supporting it with my hands to make sure that it doesn't bend away. I can't see any eggs on there. I can see a baby bee just chewing its way out. So that tells me that this brood is what we call emerging brood, and it's 21 days old. So the time from the day of the egg being laid to the adult bee popping out is 21 days. I'll just lean that up there carefully and go into the next one.
Pete, just what size hive are you inspecting today, and how many brood frames are actually in this one?
So this size flow hive is a 6 frame, which refers to the 6 flow frames up in the top box, and that's equal to 8 frames in the brood box. And the other size is a 7 frame flow hive, which equates to 10 frames in the brood box, and that's the larger size. And I find the 7 frame gets quite heavy to lift off, so I like the 6 frame myself. Oh, so I was going to say, if you don't want to use your J hook, once you get a little bit of wiggle room in your brood box, you can use this kick down part of the tool here and just put it in between the frames and lever them apart. The bees stick the frames together quite well. Then it gives you a lot of room to just grab these end bars and slowly pull them out. So this is a great frame. I've got the sun over my shoulder, which is perfect for finding brood and eggs. And a good trick with that, instead of looking for the sun and blinding yourself and then trying to see them, just look for your shadow on the comb, and then you know, oh yeah. So you can turn around until you find your shadow and then hold it up a little bit more. I'm just touching these bees to get them out of the way. You can also blow on them and they'll move. So I'm seeing eggs and lots of larvae or grubs, and that's a really great sign that the queen is doing her job well. You want to look for a good pattern, so you want to look and make sure that the queen's laid in most of the cells and she hasn't left any out. If you see like a pattern that's a bit patchy, and all the grubs over here, if you see the pattern that's a bit patchy, then your queen might be getting a little old or failing in some way, and you may find that the bees replace her, or that you might want to think about replacing her.
You were saying before that you didn't expect to see much on the edge comb, and can you explain why that is?
Yeah, so generally in the hives, not a hard and fast rule, but generally what will happen is the brood nest is kept in the centre, so all the babies are laid in here, and the bees put their resources, honey and pollen, out on the edge. And honey is really good thermal mass, so it provides insulation, but I believe I've been told that it's also, they put it out there because it's their resources and they can defend it more easily if it's away from the entrance. It also, being in the centre, also helps the bees to be able to regulate the heat of the brood, which is really important to the brood's development. So I'll put that back. And the reason I didn't expect to find much in the way of stores is just because it's been raining so much. But also around here, traditionally, late summer is a pretty hard time for the bees just because it's so hot and there's not that much in flower just in this area. But I think they've got onto something, I'm not sure what it is.
Something's going on.
Yeah.
Hey Pete, Nikki's asking, calling in from Wollongong, just wondering if one of our hives swarm, do we normally recapture it? And if we do, would we requeen it immediately, or are we just happy to keep the queen that comes with the swarm?
That's a really great call. It's a great question, I should say. The call's up to you on that. Because that swarm is really ready to get going, their life basically depends on it. They are, really ready to draw comb. They'll draw out the box of comb really quickly, and that queen is really ready to lay because she's focused on setting up a brand new colony. And you may find that the bees supersede her down the track anyway. If it was me, I just generally leave them to do their thing and see what happens. I don't generally mess around with trying to requeen a swarm. But that's just me. I generally, don't want to have to go in and do that. So yeah, hope that helps.
Yeah. I love the questions that we get and some of the answers there. Cedar's always saying, ask one beekeeper and you'll get 10 different answers. Well, we're sort of a bit like that, aren't we?
That's it. Yeah, we'll just sit on the fence.
Yeah, go with the flow.
There's a drone on my arm.
Oh.
The drones sound like little helicopters when they fly. They've got a lot of weight to carry around. So now we're getting into the centre of the brood nest. And I can see a lot of grubs in here. All the capped brood over here. It's all looking really good. The pattern is very solid. You can see down here, I don't know if you can see that, but that's all capped brood. Down here we've got eggs, over here we've got larvae. That's really what you want to see. It's an ideal pattern.
So Pete, will you be looking for the queen, or do you know by these patterns on these brood frames that there is a queen in this hive?
Yeah, that's a great question. I definitely know there's a queen because I've seen eggs, so I know that she's been there in the last 3 days because eggs hatch on day 3. So I can be sure that she's been in here. Whether she's alive today, you just don't know until you spot her. So I always like to look for her and just keep an eye out for her. But if I don't see her, then that's okay. As long as you can see eggs, then you're generally fine. If you can't see any eggs or grubs and you've got not that much capped brood, you may have a queenless colony. The bees tend to generally be a little bit more feisty or a little bit more kind of energized. They might be a little more defensive. It's sort of hard to explain how they are. They're just a little different when they're queenless. So you can sort of get a feel for it. If you see a queenless colony, pay attention to how they're being. And in that case, if you've got another hive nearby, you can drop a frame with eggs into the queenless colony, and hopefully those bees will make a new queen. You'll see some queen cells. From to emergence for a new queen takes 16 days. So you can check on them around, I guess you could check around day 3 or 4 to see if they're forming those queen cells, and then you can check around day 13 or 14 to see that you've got capped queen cells. Then you want to come back after around 3.5, 4 weeks to make sure that the new queen the virgin queen has flown out to mate with drones and that she's come back and is actually laying her eggs. And if that doesn't happen, because it's quite a big deal for her to do that, she flies out, mates with several drones, and if she gets eaten by a bird or doesn't find her way back to the hive, then your colony is now hopelessly queenless. They don't have any more eggs to make a queen. So that's something that the beekeeper will need to fix, either by buying a queen and putting her in there in a cage, or by giving them some more eggs and more bees to help with the resources to be able to make another queen.
Pete, when you're taking out these frames, when you put them back in, do they have to go in the same order?
Yeah, I like to put them in the same order. Some beekeepers like to manipulate the order of the frames around depending on what they want to do. I just put them in the same order because I kind of think, why mess the bees around? They just have to get used to a new setup. Also, the bees seem to know what they're doing. In my opinion, they know best, really. So I just tend to put the nest in the same order as it was, unless I'm trying to swap out some combs. So in that case, if I've got an old comb in the middle of the nest, I'll put it on the outside, wait for that brood to hatch out, and then pull it out, and then I can put a new frame in with and then it'll help them to draw new comb. So it can be a good way to help out with fungal diseases like chalk brood or sac brood, just swapping out old combs. This comb is pretty black, and it is pretty old, but it still looks quite healthy. The capping looks really nice. If you're seeing perforations or open caps or sort of bulging caps or just anything that looks funky in the brood capping, then you might want to investigate further. I always say it's worth having a look at anything you find a little bit strange. So I guess get a stick, let's see if I can find one. Nothing here I can see, which is great, but all I'll do is just open it up with a stick. Not a very good stick.
What are you looking for specifically here?
Well, if we find a cap that looks a little bit strange or open or perforated, which there are none, we can just open it up with the stick and just check out the colour. I might just do it with the corner of my hive tool. Just check out the colour beneath. So generally, so that's just a baby pupa under there. Generally, if you're seeing something white, it's totally fine. But if you're seeing something brown, gooey, or dry, hard, or a grub that's dried up, facing upwards, then you've got, you might have American foul brood or chalk brood or sac brood in your hive. But this is looking really good.
Pete, how often would you think is a good idea to do brood inspections on your hive? We're obviously here in Australia, we're sort of coming summer into autumn. What's sort of the general go, or do you just keep your eye on it and notice if there's any changes? Or
I like to tell beginners that have just set up with their bees to get in every couple of weeks, just because it can get overwhelming, and if you don't inspect, it starts to become something that you might feel a bit nervous about it, and so you don't do it, and then it just kind of mounts up, and then there's this pressure to do it, and then you just never end up kind of getting in there. So I just tell people, just jump in every couple of weeks. It really helps you feel okay around your bees. You start to learn what's happening in the nest and what to look for, and you get a real feel for it. But generally, you know, once a month is great. It's really a great level of care for your bees. So I try and go in once a month. In winter time, I generally just leave them alone for a couple of months while it's cold. I don't want to really upset the heat of the nest when it's under about 16 or 17 degrees Celsius. I don't go in because it just takes the bees a lot more energy to heat up that colony again and make sure their brood's at the right temperature and all those sort of things. So I just leave them be for a couple of months. I usually check them before winter time and then let them go. And then check them as spring starts to hit coming out of winter.
Pete, as we know, sometimes colonies will choose to nest in the walls of your house. Can you explain a little bit more about that and what you do if that happens?
Yeah, sure.
Call Pete.
Yeah, yeah, I guess so. It's a pretty big undertaking to get them out. So what happens there is a colony in the neighbourhood, you know, usually a managed colony like this, will throw off a swarm and the beekeeper doesn't realise and just lets it go, and it'll move into your roof cavity or your wall cavity or, you know, your letterbox or somewhere weird. And there's a couple of different ways to get it out, but the kind of the surest way to get it out is to actually, you know, cut into your wall and cut the hive out. There's a couple of different ways to do it, but you can use a really, really low suction bee vacuum to vacuum the bees off the comb and out of their cavity, and then you cut their comb out. You rubber band that comb into some blank brood frames, and then you pour the bees into a box, the box with all their brood, and put them in their new location. And it's quite a traumatic event for them, so you really need to take care of them for the first couple of weeks and make sure they get a good start in that next spot. You also may want to feed them while that happens, just to make sure they've got plenty of resources to get going. So I've done several of those. They're called cutouts or bee removals, and they're really fun, but they're a big undertaking and they're quite stressful for the bees. There's guys I watch on Instagram, I can't remember the name, they don't use vacuums, they're just really tuned into the bees' behaviours, so they can get the bees to run into the box with some old comb and a little bit of queen pheromone or something, and the bees will run off their comb and into their new box. But that's real bee whisperer type stuff.
Hey Pete, Pauline's asking, Susie's asking, and I get this a lot actually on the phones through customer support about the brood frames, and just noticing that the comb in this is quite black. And some people often say, like, do you swap out them? How could you just keep that comb in there forever? What's the general rule of that? And if it's black, is that bad?
It's not bad to have black comb. What generally happens to comb over time, because comb tends to soak everything in and hold it, like everything that comes into the hive will get into the wax. So, you know, if the bees have brought in chemicals from somewhere, you know, flowers that have just been sprayed, for instance, they'll bring them in and that will get walked into the wax, and the wax will kind of hold it. Things like, well, I believe things like fungal diseases such as chalk brood the spores can get caught up in the wax as well. So when it's old, there's a chance that it can contain those things. So you may want to start swapping your comb out. But what happens to make it black is just the foot traffic, first of all, over the combs, but then you can see the difference in colour. This is an outside frame, but you can see this has had honey in it at one time. You've got this band of colour change here. This section has had brood through it. So the cocoon that the bee has pupated in is left behind after the bee emerges. And once that happens quite a few times, the comb just gets blacker and blacker as those cocoons and feces of the larvae get left behind in the cell. The bees do clean them out, but they build up over time. And what happens is the cell walls get thicker and thicker in the brood comb. And what you can find sometimes is they're so fat that they're unusable for the bees. So the way that I would swap combs out, I think I said before, is to either move it out to the edge, where the queen doesn't generally lay, wait for all that brood to hatch out and then just pull it out, or you can, if you've got another super, you can put it upstairs above your queen excluder, and that just makes sure that the queen can't lay in it, and the bees will only put honey in it. And when they put their honey in it, you can actually pull that frame out and harvest it for yourself if the bees have plenty of food. Generally you can, it's up to the beekeeper how long they want to just keep recycling their comb. Generally you can keep it for 8 years more. Just sort of depends on you.
Great, thanks Pete. Well, this is a bit of Mark J, he's driving at the moment, so I hope he's not watching his Facebook and driving at the same time, Mark. Look, he's got a bee mentor, lots of years of experience, lots of hives, and the bee mentor has suggested taking off the flow frames over winter, and this is always a question that we get a lot. What do you think about taking the flow frames out over winter and cleaning them out, or is it just fine to leave them in over winter and the bees will clean it out and away you go?
That's another really kind of difficult question to answer without a lot more detail. It really depends where you live, your climate, and what is around for the bees during winter. So here we have a really mild winter. There's generally a little bit of a flow through the winter, so the bees have food coming in that they can stick in the flow frames. So generally for us, we sort of just leave the supers on. But if you're in a cold climate, there's not going to be much flow in wintertime, and the hive, the colony shrinks, then yeah, maybe definitely a good idea to reduce the space of the hive during that time to just help the bees maintain their ideal temperature, and also make sure there's plenty of food down in the brood box before you do that. But it also it reduces the space that the bees have to defend as well during a lean time, so that they don't have much resources. The colony will be smaller, they can't police a second level from things like hive beetle, wax moth. So yeah, it can be a really good idea. Generally, depending on how your flow frames look, there's no real need to clean them. If you harvest the honey out of them first, then that's completely adequate. You can then just store them away in an airtight container for springtime. So I hope that helps. I know it's not specific, but yeah, just depends on where you live, basically, like a lot of things in beekeeping.
Totally, Pete. Like Vic, who's asking, Vic's in Central Coast in New South Wales, and just noticed a bit of condensation on the super window in the morning when they're having a look at it. Is that a problem?
Yeah, it might be a problem. That again depends on where your hive is. If your hive is in the sun during most of the day, then I wouldn't worry about it. But if it's going to be in the shade for a lot of the day, then I'd probably just bump it out into the sun, because a hive that's got high condensation levels that isn't getting dried up during the day is way more prone to getting things like chalk brood and sac brood, the fungal diseases that affect the gut of the larvae. Because it's a fungus, it likes that kind of wet conditions, the high humidity in the hive. So yeah, I'd just bump it into the sun, and maybe if you want to, Joe, I'll just get you to bring the camera down. You can just get a stick, find a stick, and obviously when you've got your hive back together, just pop the inner cover up and chuck a couple of sticks under there, and that just gives it a little tiny bit of extra airflow circulating around, and that can really help with the condensation.
Great tune. Sorry, Pete. Just a couple of people noticed the way you've put that super box.
Yep.
Any reason? I know you always do it this way. Any reason? Or?
I do. It's just my personal way of doing it. I'm not saying it's right or wrong. I just like not having to put the bees onto something. When I pull the super off, I'm putting a piece of wood, basically, the side of the end of the hive down on the ground. If I was to put it this way and not put it on something, I leave a lot of bees behind in the grass. What can happen this way when you go to put the super back on though is all the bees have come out. So, my smoker's gone out, but I just give them a little bit of smoke. It just drives them back up. And then, I mean, you can obviously clean these quite easily too, if you do it this way. What can happen also is that this inner cover falls off, and that's totally fine. I'll just show that, it's pretty stuck on. That can fall off, that's still fine. And we can just shake the bees off, squash that hive beetle. Yeah, I just do it that way to save the bees from the grass basically. Because it's quite easy to pick up, I just put my finger there and tip it over, and I've got my other handle here. I'll just shake these guys into the hive.
Pete, Jim's asking, I don't know how this is happening, he's saying you've got a large quantity of bees clustering between the screen and the pest tray.
So, whoops. That's no good.
Beekeeping on the side of a hill.
Yeah, that's right. I might put these guys somewhere, maybe up here. So, oops, having a disaster here.
Again, beekeeping on the side of a hill.
That's okay, they're alright.
And let us know, everyone, if you're tuning in and your hive's in a precarious position.
Yeah.
Know where it is.
Yeah, we should see who's got their hives on the scariest spot.
So the bees are getting stuck between the tray and underneath.
Yeah, between the alloy screen, which is the screen on the base,
Screen up on here.
into the tray. I mean, does it just mean maybe the screen's not in properly? I had one last week where someone had actually put the screen in upside down.
That can happen.
Because otherwise there is no gap really, is there, for the bees to get in?
You do want to make sure your screen has the slope at the front facing down. But sometimes, if we go around to the front, sometimes what can happen is there gets to be a gap on the side here that a bee can fit down, or that becomes elevated in some way, so your bee just crawled in there. It doesn't have to be that much, just a couple of mil. So that may be what's happening. The other thing that can happen is when your tray is in, somehow the inside edge of this cover might not be contacting that tray, and so there may be a gap between here and here that the bees can access. So you might just want to check those things.
Yep, and just make sure that vented cover's in correctly.
Yeah, you can block holes up with things like silicone or steel wool. Silicone's probably easier or lasts longer, but you just want to make sure the bees don't get caught on it. So what you can do is just put some silicone in and then just put some masking tape straight over it, and then it'll dry over several days, and then you just peel the masking tape off. Steel wool will block it really quickly, but it will just start rusting and leave a rusty mess. Something like the stuff off, I don't know what it's called, if you peel some of that blue stuff off the top of this scrubbing foam pad that you use on your dishes, that can be great too. That doesn't rust, and the bees can't chew it, so that's a pretty good option if you want to block up any kind of hole.
Oh, that's a great tip, Pete. Thanks for that.
Someone let us know if you know what that material is.
Yeah, and if you can get it by itself. You don't have to destroy your dish sponges.
Hey Pete, Bianca's asking, you're wearing black and how come the bees aren't stinging you?
Yeah, I know, I forgot. I put my black shirt on this morning and forgot I was doing this, but I don't know. I don't generally find that it stirs them up that much, but I don't know. I'm just rolling with it and we're seeing what happens, I suppose. Our friend Requeening says that the bees like to go for contrast between a dark colour and a white colour. I haven't seen that either. Having said that though, this colony is really cool. It's really gentle and nice. So
Heat is also tougher than your average human, everybody. So it's not recommended that you try wearing black beekeeping.
yeah, that's right. That's true. Wear your bee suit. I've said before, but I don't like to wear a bee suit very much, just because it's so hot, but also because I can get a lot more of a feel for how the bees are doing. Also, I can't see through my veil very well, so I don't like wearing a veil. But having said that, if the bees start attacking me or just acting defensive, then I'll definitely put my jacket on. It's just over there.
Pete, were you always like that, or did you start beekeeping like that, or is it something you've, like for a lot of beginner beekeepers, it's something you kind of can work up to?
I definitely didn't start that way, no. I started with my bee suit and gloves, and then I just took my gloves off, and I recommend any beekeeper, just once they feel comfortable around their bees, if their bees are nice, I recommend to take your gloves off, because it gives you a much more of a sort of tactile sense of what's going on with the bees and what to do. But from there I started wearing a veil only, and then from there I just sort of stopped wearing anything. But I always take my jacket with me just in case, and I will put it on if the bees are feisty.
Are you aiming to be the naked beekeeper?
Yeah, just completely naked. No black shirt. I don't think that's a good idea, Trace.
No. Hey Pete, how fast should a colony grow?
It really depends on what's around for them. It's always the kind of million-dollar question, how long will it take? And I don't know what to say except it takes as long as it takes. When there's a lot of food for them, it can go really fast. And when there's hardly any food, they can just be in a holding pattern forever. It seems like forever and ever. Once you get your first bees, it's really exciting. And it's like, wow, this is so amazing and so cool. And then it's kind of like, when are they going to do something? But once they really start going, then it actually becomes really exciting again. And they can, once they get onto something, they can go really quickly. I've just seen a baby bee emerging. It looks really fluffy and cute. I love to see that.
Oh, we're having another birth. Like we had Bertha, didn't we, a few weeks ago?
Her Bertha?
We had Bertha birthing. That was with Cedar a couple of weeks ago. Scouring pads, someone said they're called.
Scouring pad?
Yeah.
Yeah, make sure it's not the steel wool though. Not steel. There's a lot of waggle dances going on this frame. So the bees have found something. There's a waggle dance there.
What is the waggle dance?
It's the way that the bees communicate to the other bees in the colony where the nectar source is. So these bees have found a nectar source, and they're actually doing this dance to tell the other bees, hey, come and help. They're recruiting the other bees to come and help work that nectar source. So if you can imagine, in the colony it's dark, and so the bees can't really see that well. So what they do is they dance and waggle, and there's this formula that someone's worked out of what that means in relation to the sun and the distance and all that kind of stuff. It's pretty incredible. Any more questions, Trace?
Yeah, Tizza, who comes in every week, is just asking, I can't remember where Tizza is, I think somewhere in New South Wales, but just wondering, is it too late in the season to do a split? They have a hive that's almost bursting.
Yeah, good question. It depends on the amount of food that's in the colony, first of all, I would say. It's always risky this late to weaken the colony so much by taking away some of the bees. What you could possibly do is make a smaller split, so not a full half, not taking away half the frames. You could make a small split if you have a small box. So for instance, you could make a 3-frame nuke and see what happens there. But yeah, it's a tricky call. I probably wouldn't, to be honest, but you can just try it and see what happens. But just make sure that if you do it, then you monitor the split and you monitor the parent hive and make sure that they're going to make it through okay. And you may want to combine them back together if they're not going to make it.
Our bee detectives looking at that frame noticed that there were lots of drones on that frame.
Yeah, there are a lot of drones in this colony, which is, I think, is still a great sign. It means that the colony's got a lot of resources to be able to keep those drones, because drones are quite resource heavy. They eat a lot of honey. It takes them a lot of energy to fly because they're so big, and they fly out every day. So it can be a real drain on a colony with not many resources. And there's a lot of drone comb up here. So here's a good thing to point out actually, is the different cell sizing. I might shake these bees off so we can get a good look at it. So I'm just going to have a really gentle shake. And put a lot of bees in the air. They're getting a bit feisty now.
Yeah, that got them going.
They're just bumping me. That's okay. I always get stuck in my beard. So here we can see a lot of capped brood, but also a lot of pollen. Now these cell sizes are important because this smaller size cell that looks quite hexagonal, they're all worker brood size cells. So the queen will come up to those and lay worker brood, worker eggs in them I should say. But over here we've got drone size cells. And they're, you can see they've had several rounds of brood go through them because the cell walls are really thick. But they've also got more circular and they're a lot bigger. And just over here in the corner, right here we can see dedicated honey cells, which have a little bit of an angle upwards, and the bees will only put honey in those cells. The bees can put honey in all these cell sizes, but the queen won't lay in the dedicated honey cells because they're just the wrong shape. They've got an angle to them. So here we've got the drone size cells, and here we've got the worker size cells.
That's great, Pete, being able to see that so clearly on that frame, the difference in the sizes.
I'll find the other side. So it's generally the same on the other side. Here you can see some capped drone brood. The drones take a little bit longer than workers to develop. So the drones take 24 days to the workers 21. And it's just because they're a bigger bee. They need those bigger cells and the bigger capping to accommodate their large size. But they're just the same, they'll chew their way out around day 24.
Fantastic, and all those colours of pollen.
Yeah, lots of pollen colours there.
Yeah. Peter, Pauline's saying they did a honey harvest from a couple of frames a few weeks ago, but now they're looking at the rear of the hive, you know, into the channel where the honey actually flows out. They've just noticed there's a bit of honey down there. Just wondering if that's a problem, or do you think it's time to engage the leak back point?
Yes, I would definitely engage the
My
leak back
favourite
point.
part.
Yeah. So Jai, if we come down here, I can show you the end of the frame, the flow frame here. And the bees will really gum this up. They like to block all the holes with propolis and wax. So what we need to do is just give them a twist and clean them up, or pull them out and clean them up, just so that you can see that this hole here isn't blocked. And that's the leak back point. So when there's honey in here, the hive is sloped backwards, that honey will run down to this point and the bees will actually lick it up with their tongues, as long as this lets it do it. These caps have a little ridges that sit at proud of this point, and so they're actually designed to leave a space there, but like I said, the bees just gum that up. So usually all it takes is a little bit of a twist back and forth. If you can't twist it, sometimes it's really jam tight, you may just want to pull it out and give it a clean. So these bees are getting pretty feisty. I might just put the colony back together. So I like to keep all these, as I put the combs back, I like to keep the end bars together, and that just lets me at the end shove everything over without squashing heaps of bees as all these kind of get back together. So just gently push that down and then lever it across. And then I've got room to put my last frame in. Now, I didn't find the queen in this inspection, so I'm pretty sure, not 100% sure, but I'm pretty sure she wasn't on this outside frame. But I did lean it up against the super, so there is a chance she was on here and went into the super. So I'll have to just figure that out later on. I believe it went that way.
And Pete, with the brood frames that we're using here today, people talk about foundation and foundationless and comb guides, and why does Flow choose to just do them foundationless?
I think it's just to give the bees a chance to really draw their own comb and do what they want to do. So they've evolved to be able to draw comb, and they want to draw comb. So it really gives them a chance to be able to do that. Plus, we talked about cell sizes before. It lets them draw the cell sizes that they want to draw. So if they want to draw drone size cells, they can. But if you're just giving them worker size foundation, then they're going to have a hard time putting the drones somewhere because they need those bigger cells. So they might draw that drone comb down the bottom, off the bottom of the brood frame, or up the top, on top of the brood frame, just in places where it's inconvenient for the beekeeper.
So with the flow frames, Pete, what size are the cells in the flow frames? Does it matter whether they're drone size or worker size?
Yeah, when Cedar and Stu were designing this, there was a lot of thought that went into that and a lot of testing. So the flow cells are, I believe they're a little bigger than drone cells. And it's a baby bee. So if the queen does get stuck up in the top, there is a chance that she will lay drone eggs in the flow frames, and that's really what you don't want to do. So some queens won't and some queens will. We don't know why that is, but you really don't want your queen in the top box, because when you go to harvest you're going to squash all those drones in the flow frames. So we want to make sure that the queen's in the bottom box, and I'll actually go through these off camera and make sure the queen's not there.
Right. So Sam's asking, in Sydney and getting a nuke this Saturday, is there enough time for the bees to settle in now and have enough food for the winter, and should they wait until spring to put the super on?
Yes, definitely wait until spring to put the super on. It can really depend on what is around for the bees at the time in your area. I don't really know what's happening in Sydney for the bees at the moment myself, but if you install the nuke, then make sure in that nuke there's plenty of food for the bees in the nuke already, because they might not get a chance before spring to build up their stores very much. And I definitely would leave the super off and just use the brood box. Pretty much whenever you're installing a nuke into your flow hive, just put your super away in the shed for a while until your brood box is completely full of wax, drawn wax and bees and honey and pollen. So that's all we've got time for today. Thanks so much for tuning in. My name's Pete. Cedar's away this week, and appreciate you having me. I'll see you next time.